Hello and welcome to the MPSA Leadership Insights. Today's session will be featuring Will Parker, the Director of Sales, Marketing, and Strategy globally for Datasec Solutions. If this is your first time joining us for the Leadership Insights series, this is sponsored by our Education Committee, and we're thrilled to be sharing insights truly from across the globe, as Will is joining us today from Australia. If you are not yet connected with us on LinkedIn, please check us out and check out our new ebook series. The Management Services Association is a proud community of volunteers that provides education, research, and best practices to help organizations across the globe manage and optimize their business processes and related document output solutions. If you're not yet a member of the MPSA or would like to learn more, please go to yourmpsa.org. Some of our member benefits, and want to feature a couple today, is we do have a new ebooks out, really some great content out to really help you move initiatives forward in your business. And we're proud to announce our first two recipients of our new MPSA Leadership Circle Awards. Our first Vendor Leadership Circle Award was granted to EKM Global, and our first dealer member to Kelly Create. The MPSA provides lots of opportunities for networking with professionals, getting plugged into committees like the Education Committee, and earning your certification accreditation. For more information about membership, they're available for individuals, organizations, vendors, a wide variety depending on where you fit into the industry. We would welcome your input to the MPSA. Well, we're going to get into the interview here today with Will Parker. I think we were discussing how many hours ahead of me you are right now. I'm joining everyone today live from our Phoenix office here, where I'm at for my business travels this week. And Will, can you share with us what part of Australia you're in?
So I'm on the beautiful and sunny East Coast in Brisbane. We don't have to deal with daylight saving time at any time during the year, but we do have to deal with being 17 hours ahead of most of the rest of you guys. And as I often say, if I could tell you how the day winds up at Wall Street, neither of us would have to be doing this right now. Because let me tell you, the day turns out to be fine. I slept through most of it.
Wonderful, Will. And I know, Will, we do a lot of the Education Committee meetings together, so you're used to working at strange hours as you connect and work with a lot of people in the U.S. And at one time, you did live in the United States as well. You spent time in Boise, correct?
For sure, lived there with the family, and my kids had the privilege of going through their high school, secondary school education in the Idaho system, and came out stronger and more ambitious for it. So yeah, we love Boise. I still think of Idaho as my Idaho home away from home. And shortly going back there at the end of this week for the Tech U event at HP to teach about our solutions and to catch up with old friends. So really looking forward to that.
Well, I probably should have scheduled to be in our Boise office this week instead of down in Phoenix. But let's start our interview today and just kind of introduce you to our global audience. I'm sure people that are familiar may not be familiar with you personally or Datasec. So let's start by hearing about you, your role within your organization, and can you give us a high-level description of what Datasec Solutions does?
Absolutely, Sarah. So I'm getting on in the industry now. I've had 30 years working in this space or thereabouts. I've worked for almost all of the majors. I spent 18 years at Canon, cutting my teeth on production print, color science, and human visual systems. I did a lot of training and teaching on production and color management as we started to move into digital short-run production. I've worked in electronic document management, content management, and have a very, very strong grounding in Linux operating systems and the web. So when things started to transition to cloud and security aspects, I feel like I'd cut my teeth in all of the right areas in the early part of my career. I moved into people leadership and management, which was part of my journey through Singapore and ultimately the US before moving home, where I joined Datasec, who I'd been working with in my executive roles in HP for a number of years, since they were an innovator working on what's essentially a very powerful Android extensibility layer for the multifunction devices. It really allows us to bring apps to the panel of the printer, and it's a very different way of thinking about the multifunction device, which we'll, I'm sure, touch upon in our conversation. But Datasec's heritage, it's a startup from Melbourne, Australia, but we have a grounding in cryptography, security, and cloud native solutions and systems, especially around identity. And this has really become the main pivot for us in working with HP, has been around the Microsoft identity flows, Microsoft 365 workflows, and really trying to bring that secure document handling to the HP print and multifunction devices. So, you know, we're app developers, software developers, but also try to be thought leaders and experts in both security, identity, and document workflow in the modern cloud-enabled workspace.
What's your organization in general? I know you do a lot of work with HP, but how do you operate within the managed print services landscape? So I know we've touched on some high-level topics of the importance of what the work you're doing, but as you think about, okay, what are the types of things that you're doing that a user would recognize, or that we as consumers or providers of managed print services should understand about those aspects as we look at the operations of MPS within the community?
Sure. And I think we actually fulfill a very important and interesting role. I certainly like to think of my role in interacting with all the entities in our industry, which I've worked in for so long, as really try to be a trusted advisor. First and foremost, yes, we have a product set, especially at the moment. Our commercial off-the-shelf solution at the moment does depend upon a modern extensibility layer that can talk the authentication protocols and things to the cloud. But, you know, an area where we're increasingly engaged across the community, and this is not just end users at customers, but within the dealer network, within the channel, and also talking to some OEMs when we cross paths, for instance, in somewhat more vendor neutral circumstances, is to try and provide leadership, education, and context to what's changing in the industry. And it really is the move to cloud that's been talked about so much for so long. In fact, that's coming at the point where we also start hearing about people talking about a move back onto prem, you know, building AI-based data centers and systems back on-prem. But in reality, the cloud is the central work engine for the modern workspace. It allows us, since COVID, to work from home or from the office, or to travel as you do and I do, work at all hours of the day or night, yay. But it does mean that we're connected in ways that we never were before. And our documents have to come with us. And so I think ultimately for me, this is more about the identity of the end user, the identity of the administrators who have to curate and care for that data and are custodians of the business's confidential data, the potential spread of data, and what I think of as, and I know this is something that's close to your heart, Sarah, that the entropy that sets into data if it's left to its own devices, it will bloat, it will spread, it gets full of cruft. And I think at the moment where we're at is a true understanding that data is not just, you know, a piece of paper. It's the page that's represented by the paper. And whether that's printing that page out or scanning that page in, there are workflows more than anything that need to be taken into consideration. And they involve security, authentication, authorization, but also what do we do with the data then? How do we refine it, make it more useful for the business? And so Datasec is across all of that. And I think as part of the changes happening in the industry, we're in a unique position to speak on behalf of, you know, hardware manufacturers and vendors who are putting the technologies into their platforms that are more and more on the edge of the network, perimeter devices, true IoT devices, the identity of the users who are engaging with these devices as digital on and off ramps, the paper coming in and paper coming out of the organization, and then the workflows behind it, because we are living in a different type of office space nowadays.
help me understand, pretend like we've never met before. We've not talked before. So we're going to have a lot of people on this live stream that are like, what the heck did Will just say? Okay. Because I'm tracking, because we've talked a lot in the past, but when we think about down to brass tacks, where Datasec comes in and works with, for example, an equipment manufacturer, what are the deliverables that are addressing these needs for your clients?
Yeah, it's a focus point of your question, and it's quite right to drill down on that, Sarah, because I don't want to get too product specific, but this knowledge that we have in some somewhat esoteric and technical areas of the modern landscape doesn't necessarily clarify things for people. Essentially, when we walk up to a multifunction device, we're talking about a device that's always sat on our business's network. We almost take them for granted. In fact, we take for granted that the thing is probably just as likely to let us down as to do the sort of things that it's ostensibly best at. And the kick the copier mentality I like to talk about is one that we really need to face up to as an industry. And I think generally we do. No one ever tries to pretend that printers are sexy or fashionable. But, HP's tried by putting the blue and yellow and green fronts on them. They look a bit better. But, essentially, if they don't work and get stuff done for someone, they become, something that people don't even love to hate. They just hate them. And I think that if you can't walk up to one of these supposed multi-function devices, put a document on it and get it to go exactly where you want it to go, which, let's face it, is your email inbox, your OneDrive, your SharePoint, your Teams channels in your business securely and without fuss, then the machine's sort of letting us down. And so my feeling and the vision that I have for the industry is to turn these multifunction devices into a smart device. They should be a smart device like our phones, like tablets, iPads, Galaxy tablets, or laptops. And they should be an integrated part of our broader IT strategy. And so what Datasec has built is a set of productivity tools that are secure and convenient to use in the modern office. So the office is sitting in the cloud, your documents are sitting in the cloud, secured, let's say by Microsoft 365. But when you need to scan your receipts, your expense reports, or a contract, or a property you're selling, or some other document, a pathology report for a patient or something, into your estate, your Microsoft estate, at the moment, that's not easy to do. And quite often it can fail as often as it succeeds. What's the scan destination? Do I have permissions to get to the scan destination, the printer put the document in when I get back to my laptop? This is nonsense. And I think that one of the things that Datasec strives to do in a vendor agnostic way is to help guide the channel and our customers to think about these devices in a very different way, to think about them as an integrated endpoint to the rest of their document workflows, not just the copier or the multifunction device that isn't that doesn't often function, and is therefore just a device that's one of the last things left on-prem. I hope that made more sense. I often hear this, people say, "Well, I love what you just said, but I had no idea what it was."
Yeah, I already called you out for that, but you make a very strong point, and I'm going a little kind of diving a little deeper into that. Is why is this asset so still standalone in how we connect?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is Datasec looks to offer solutions to really make that an integrated part of a modern workflow.
That's right.
Okay, you can hire me to work on your marketing team now. There you go.
All right, absolutely. And certainly, that those conversations are sometimes hard to have, because what we show when we demonstrate our technology is something that's really so different to the traditional product set that's out there, that in one sense, people will never look at the product landscape the same way after they've seen the demonstration. People go, "Oh, wow, yeah, they can really do that now." Other people say, "Don't they all do that?" And it's, well, you haven't looked at the landscape very recently, because no, they don't. It's not intuitive for somebody who is in IT and expects devices to sign in with passwordless MFAs, multi-factor authentications, to be secured in the way that we expect all of the other devices on the network to be secured, and then just get down to business and do the work that the device is supposed to do. And IT guys sometimes just don't understand why broadly the print OEMs haven't created solutions that just work in this modern environment, because we know all of the OEMs talk about cloud, they talk about being services led and solutions led, and they consult their customers and what their needs are. But at the end of the day, it's still a lot of hardware, as you said, sitting in a kind of isolated island. Some of the last devices left on-prem, like when you think about it, you've got your wireless access points in the office. So you come in with your laptop, that goes home with you at the end of the day, along with your phone and your tablet. You plug in your laptop, or you sit down at a hot desk, a thin client, it talks to a wireless access point. Maybe you've got some meeting room equipment, tablets on the outside of the room so you can book rooms. That works with your online cloud-based calendar. What else is there on site that's hardware-based, like we used to have in the old days? It's the printers. It's multifunction devices, maybe smart lockers, and the rest of the utilities on site, so the lifts and the doors and this sort of infrastructure. So we're trying to bring the multifunction printer device into the smart category, make it more of an integrated part of the way people work now. And the place that starts is actually with their identity. Who is it using this device? Because that determines where they want to put documents, where they want to get documents from, and what they want to do with those documents. And that's just a whole different way of thinking about the way we can integrate.
So from your perspective, what is the most significant way your organization at Datasec, and we've talked a little bit about this, but what has been your involvement with the MPSA, and what contributions do you feel that Datasec is, not you as a person, but Datasec is also providing to the MPSA, but also to our overall print community?
Look, I think Datasec can help the channel, can help our customers and their customers understand how to tell a stronger story, have a stronger technical foundation in the modern cloud-based world. And so instead of leading with a cost per page or a volume target of boxes shifted per month, and device consolidation, in an industry where people are very concerned with cutting costs, reducing the number of printers in a different way than we used to. We used to, put one A3 per floor to replace 10 A4 personal printers, replaced with one A3, multifunction. And now we're talking about one A3 multifunction per building, and then more individual printers per floor. And so this sort of cycle of what people are expecting from print, is really all about understanding what their workplace is like and having that access when they're at home. And so we can help with a conversation that moves the conversation away from cost per page and device consolidation, speeds and feeds, to productivity, security, convenience, governance, and Microsoft alignment or industry standard alignments around security, because there's a lot of risks once your data starts to go, off-site across the internet into the cloud.
Exactly. So describe a time when your organization, when Datasec, has adapted to a major industry shift. What did, and this could be you personally too, but what did you learn from that you can share with us today in the MPSA community?
I think a really interesting time we all dealt with the shift was across the pandemic. I was at that time traveling, believe it or not, internationally with my whole family between Singapore, which had a very strong lockdown, into Idaho, which wasn't quite so much. And I'm thankful that I wasn't in some of the Australian lockdown circumstances at that time. But what I was able to witness in an international way was all the different ways that businesses woke up to the fact that you can actually work from anywhere. And in fact, people can be more productive working from anywhere. They can travel more effectively with carrying less equipment and needing less preparation at a moment's notice. I can be with a client in Phoenix. I can talk to a client in Stuttgart. I can do that overnight. And the tool sets that we needed to be effective at that, accessing our documents from anywhere, scanning into, pulling documents from anywhere, we're already there. But we hadn't been through a kind of shakeup that required us to suddenly seize that moment and make it part of our daily lives. And in fact, for most of us, I think that has become essentially what we think of now as the new normal. So for Datasec, we went through this. In fact, I was with HP at the time, but Datasec went through this. They had all of the challenges of being a startup. with a product set that was focused at the time very much on face identity and cryptography and high security solutions for organizations that needed a lot of technical background to this, but public key infrastructure for signing in on laptops or into buildings and so forth. And became very increasingly obvious that with the technology that we had to capture the modern office with document in and document out, the on and off ramp for organizations' content management, the HP devices were an ideal opportunity to start bringing that technology across and making it relevant to the everyday user, not just high security businesses, not just environments which needed an air gap, where you couldn't take a phone, for example. Like, how do you sign in somewhere where you can't carry any electronics into an area? We're so used to carrying RSA dongles or keys, little digital devices with numbers on them, or phones that give us, multiple digit one-time pins and so forth. So we had these sorts of solutions, but it was the work that I was doing with Datasec in my role as the tier one architecture lead, manager of the architecture team out of Boise, that I realized the power that the Datasec solution had. And I really worked very hard with Paul and the team to focus in on a product we could bring to market that was part of a story we could tell to the channel, a part of a story that helped with the transformation of the humble printer into a smart device. And I think that that's the industry shift that Datasec was uniquely able to capitalize on. And the guys had to step back and take pay cuts and have the business survive across that period as a small startup. And by the time we got through the pandemic, the product became real. I helped coach the business through to getting it onto the commercial price list for HP, became an HP branded product. Really a tremendous international success story for a business startup that was grounded in cryptography and identity and security, coming into the world of productivity, automation, and integrated systems. And it's been just really exciting to join and help steer the ship and influence the product and tell this story. I think that's, to answer the previous question a little bit further, is that part of the story that I like to help partners and the channel tell their customers. It's more than just a question about what's the cheapest click, what's the best machine for the print volume in this site or that site. It's about, what does the customer need to do with their data now? There's another very important thing that I think has changed in the industry is we tend to feel that as we're printing less, people value print less. And I think quite the opposite is true. I think people actually value print more now than they ever have. And the reason for that is there are less printers out there. There's certainly a choice you have to make on which printer you can access and print to, and is it black and white or color? Can I do double-sided? So when I want to print, I absolutely have to print, and I have to know when and how I can print, because it might be for a customer in 10 minutes time, I've got to put something in front of, sign a contract. So I think, quite opposite to the idea that print is less relevant. I think it's more relevant than ever. I think we need to scan things into where we need them to go, and when we need to pull them straight from where they are when we need them. And that's where these devices really come into their own, and they become a whole new type of smart device because the paper is still so relevant.
It's contagious to hear your passion for that and the passion for where the industry is. So reflecting on our conversation, what do you feel, and you've touched on this already, but let's expand upon what you see as the biggest opportunity for innovation and collaboration within managed print?
Look, this is something that I've done sort of print TED Talk type things on before, but for me, I like to say that the paper is not the page. It's the data that's important for our customers. It's the data that drives our businesses. And the paper is not the page. The page is what people want. They want the page on paper sometimes, but quite often they want to get the page off paper. And paper is still that sort of lowest common denominator of transactionable information in this human-driven world. For as long as we're not being driven entirely by AI, the page is still that common currency. And most of us know that we still need the page more often than perhaps we'd like to admit. And my kids do too. They're often printing things out because it's just such a convenient mechanism of putting, 1200K in your pocket, folding it up, being able to annotate on. this sort of thing is so critical. So the paper is not the page, and the data, therefore, is the most important thing in our businesses. The security and the integrity and the location of that data is absolutely critical. And I like to think of, in my work across content management in my career, I've sort of thought of a kind of a Hippocratic oath for the sort of work we do. Like doctors' first principle is, do first do no harm. My first principle is, whenever you come across data, leave it in a better state than you found it. Like, that to me is the absolute founding principle of what we do when we're dealing with these transactional currencies of information for our businesses, is can we improve the data every time we touch it? And that means, metadata is better data. Classifying and improving the quality of the data when we ingest it, when we scan it in, or categorizing it properly when we want to get it out of the systems, is something that AI can help us with in ways that we haven't even begun to really tap, because it's so good at working with known quantities of data. When you ask an AI to tell you philosophically what the right decision is to do about something, there's all sorts of room for hallucination and opinions filtering in that the machine mind is going to just dream up. When you give it a solid set of data that it can go through, understand, and pull real data back from, there's much less hallucination. So when we think about the data lakes that all of our business information sits in the cloud, whether you're working with Copilot or ChatGPT, Gemini, any of these systems, if you can point it at a data source securely, mind you, it's got to be tenant bound and not let all of your secret data out into the public domain. Absolutely. And that's where the security and the identity piece is absolutely critical. And another area that Datasec does work in, which is the post-quantum security area. So we've got post-quantum security technologies that will allow us to transition this gap between, all of our data being secure now, but in 10, 20 years time, open for reading and just, available to just read in a text file. So, all of these technologies are coming together, and it's such a rush. But we still rely on the piece of paper. We still rely on being able to do something useful with that piece of paper. And for me, that's really the whole story of what we're trying to do as a business. And I think in our interactions with the channel, and you can tell I'm passionate and I evangelize this. I really think that this industry is one that business depends on more than it knows. And I think that our conversations can be stronger if we start to show customers that their security strategy can be led by their printers and the way they deal with this information, because where else do you have such a clear personification of that piece of data that's so important to us? I need it now, or I need to scan it now, or I need to transact with it now. So you better be able to print it out where I want it, when I want it, how I want it. And then when I've signed the contract, it's got to go in, it's got to go reliably and securely into the system that we're depending on for the rest of the digital workflow. And that to me is a really exciting conversation. One very, very quick aside to that is we've worked recently with a city organization in the US where they really hadn't implemented multi-factor authentication across the city. A lot of the users didn't want to use their phones. They didn't want to feel like they had to bring their phone to work to put in a one-time PIN in Authenticator. The reality is people may not want to do that, but in order to remain secure, there has to be something that tells the system that it's actually you, not just someone with your badge or someone who knows your password. Because phishing and getting those knowledge factors from you is part of me becoming you in the network. And if you're the managing director and I can get your mailbox, it's over. Forget about it, even from an insurance perspective, reputationally, everything else. So it all starts with identity. And so having the ability to say with a print solution, guys, you have to move to multi-factor authentication. This is not just Microsoft saying, oh, you have to do this. Microsoft is responsible for keeping your data secure in the cloud. You have to play a part in that. And when you're using a shared device, something that all of us use throughout the day, it's got to be secure. We've got to know that it's Sarah signing in, not just someone with Sarah's credential. And this to me is a really important thing, because when we start talking to internet service providers or IT service providers alongside our managed print providers about what their customer is expecting from their security, suddenly print is a determining factor in the strategy. It starts to drive the tactics. Well, how are we going to move to MFA, and what devices can we use to make that a part of the business case? And it's It's fascinating. We saw this whole city change their status. They started mandating multi-factor authentication because all they were doing before was signing in with Windows Hello on their desktop, which, is great on the desktop, but as soon as you're using a shared device, you have to be able to prove who it is. So this has been a fantastic experience because I don't think that there's ever been a time in my multi-decade career when print has kind of led the conversation about a security shift, a change in posture and stance for a whole organization. And the IT guys loved us because it was like the camel that broke the back of finally getting the whole organization on board with moving across to a more secure, more convenient and productive way of operating.
We've kind of, in working in the past, being in managed print from various aspects in my career, for many IT departments, the print environment kind of, I don't know if in Australia you have the junk drawer in your kitchen, that drawer where we just stick the stuff we don't want to deal with or we'll look at later. And many times the printers became kind of the junk drawer of the corporate IT infrastructure. And so by positioning it the way you've just described, it's like, no, guys, we can't just kind of shove this in a corner and not think about it. It's very exciting to hear you articulate that. If you wanted to think of one key message that you want to leave our attending audience, those that are out on the live stream today, we so appreciate you joining Will and I across global time zones to talk about these, to talk about his role at Datasec, what Datasec is doing to lead in the industry globally. But if you wanted to leave us with one, and if you need to meander onto two key messages that you would really want people to know about you, your organization, and where they should be looking and what knowledge that you would like to impart, I'd like to open it up to that question, please.
100%, Sarah. So first of all, that it's amazing what you find in that junk drawer when you open it up and start to actually audit what's in there, because those things have accumulated there because they're important, they're valuable, they're precious, they have heritage and provenance. And, in Australia, I think more of the man drawer. It's definitely got things in there that I could be part with that I haven't. But the fact that it's a mess is an opportunity then to recognize the value of what's there. And most IT departments do see print as a burden. They see it as an imposition. More and more now, they see it as a security risk. So the first message that I have, is really, print is far from dead. It's far from losing relevance. It's more relevant than ever. It's more important than ever. And it's more of a conversation driver than most people think. And if you've sort of fallen into the traditional thinking where it's hard to have those conversations, then reevaluating that, thinking about identity and security and workflows, not just clicks, is just such an important conversation because it's more relevant than ever. Customers still need to print and scan, and they expect them nowadays to align with identity, security, and their productivity strategy. So that's the first thing that I would say. The other message that I would love to leave the MPS community with is this is an opportunity for us to lead that conversation. I mean, we are an industry and an organizational context that customers often want to ignore and leave to the last minute. But we've got more compelling reasons than ever to say, do not leave that till last. In fact, if you can lead a project to help secure your organization by changing a few printers, saving money, becoming more secure and productive and convenient, then what better way to start to consolidate security, drive evolution in the business? This is digital transformation in its purest form because it changes people's behavior to being more productive, more secure, and working with more convenient solutions that makes the whole organization more competitive. So I think that we just got this unique opportunity to show hands-on customers what they could get from these devices now to make their businesses better, work with AI, work with all of these marvelous technologies that we have to work from anywhere. And, it's just waiting for us as an industry to pick up on that conversation. And you don't have to be the expert at it because you need an expert like the guys in Datasec, like the guys who are specialists in the OEMs to come and have that conversation with the technical experts in your business. But the decision makers have to understand that this is a gold mine. They're leaving money on the table in terms of saving time, costs, waste, sustainability messaging. If they don't look at print and their multifunction, as I like to think of it now, smart document exchanges as a leading conversation in the whole business's strategy. And I think that's a really exciting place for our industry to be, instead of the doom and gloom of people want a paperless office.
I know I'm fired up. Okay. For full disclosure, Will and I serve on the education committee together. And that is one of my favorite parts of being in the MPSA. So yeah, a lot of times I get more than I give by interacting and networking with folks like Will. So it's just been such a pleasure today to interview you and learn more about you and Datasec and really the philosophy and the trends that you guys are addressing and driving for print. So just want to thank you so much and wrap up this session. And please, if you have any follow-up questions for Will or I, shoot them over. We look forward to hearing from you. And please, if you're not already a member, check us out here at the MPSA.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sarah.
Will.